Had a Liberal government that a bunch of staffers randomly got a highlighter, just a big scam as far as I'm concerned.
Ontario's NDP has uncovered that the Ford government issued 18 minister zoning orders, known as MZOs, to fast-track development, all to people who were guests at a wedding for the Premier's daughter last summer.
Speaker, it's very obvious that the Premier's office was more involved in all of these decisions than they've disclosed.
I made a promise to you that I wouldn't touch the Greenbelt. I broke that promise. And for that, I am very, very sorry.
Before we get into it, I want to talk about the Greenbelt itself. As the Greater Toronto Area began to become increasingly urbanized in the mid-20th century, it became apparent that the surrounding natural areas, some of the most biodiverse regions in the country, would need protection. In 1973, in response to a growing environmental movement, Bill Davis's government ensured the protection and maintenance of the Niagara Escarpment, only allowing development that was, quote, compatible with the natural environment under the Niagara Escarpment Planning and Development Act. This protected strip of land ran from the south shore of Lake Ontario to Tobermory. The escarpment was eventually designated a UNESCO World Biosphere Reserve in 1990. In 2000, under the urging of grassroots organizations, the Mike Harris government expanded the protected lands by creating the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan, which protects 469,500 acres of land. The greatest accomplishment, though, came in 2005, when Premier Dalton McGuinty established Ontario's Golden Horseshoe Greenbelt, the largest greenbelt in the entire world. The Golden Horseshoe Greenbelt, most commonly referred to simply as the Greenbelt, not only includes the Niagara Escarpment and the Oak Ridges Moraine, but also nearly 1 million acres of prime farmland. This protected area has historically been a point of pride for Ontarians. It's a staple of our culture and our heritage. It's a key element in our fight against climate change, and it plays a crucial role in our agriculture. The Greenbelt is home to over 3,800 species, 31 of which are threatened, and that's after Ontario severely limited the definition of what a threatened species actually is. The Greenbelt has been a much-loved feature of our province and had been well protected until in 2018, this guy was elected. For those of you lucky enough to not know who this is Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, meaning he's the head of our provincial government. And protecting the environment and fighting climate change has historically been pretty low on his agenda. Shortly after he was elected as Premier in 2018, a video was leaked of Doug Ford telling a whole room of developers that he would, quote, open a big chunk of the Greenbelt to housing development. Yeah.
We will open up the Greenbelt, not all of it. We're going to open a big chunk of it up, and we're going to start building.
I guess that makes me the devil.
You are! She is the devil! I'm in hell!
When the public found out about this, they were pretty mad, and Ford quickly backtracked and said he wouldn't touch the Greenbelt. Wait, he didn't keep his word on that? But politicians are normally so honest.
Unequivocally, we won't touch the Greenbelt. Unlike other governments that don't listen to people, I've heard it loud and clear. People don't want me touching the Greenbelt. I'm not touching the Greenbelt. I would talk to the Minister of Environment about that, but we're putting together a good plan for the environment. We have a housing crisis today that we didn't have 4 years ago. We are going to make sure we get housing built.
This first song is called A World on Fire.
Nope, good old Doug Ford did not keep his word, and in November 2022, he changed his mind and opened up 7,400 of the 2 million acres of the Greenbelt to housing development. Yeah, we weren't happy about that either. At first, Doug Ford doubled down and discredited the work of scientists and agriculturalists who spent 2 years deciding the Greenbelt boundaries and called the whole thing a big scam. The Greenbelt is not only home to prime farmland, wetlands, and native wildlife, but also to many important waterways. And since Canada has 7% of the world's renewable freshwater reserves, yeah, it's pretty important to us that that land remains protected. So naturally, people were pretty upset about this, and eventually, in September 2023, Doug Ford finally apologized about making the wrong decision. after it was leaked to the public that all 18 contractors who had early access were also his friends and had attended his daughter's wedding and had bought tickets to his daughter's stag and do, but that couldn't have possibly had anything to do with him changing his mind, right? For a few short months, it seemed as though the Greenbelt was going to be just fine. What a nice and ignorant time that was. Then, in February 2024, Doug Ford's government announced the Omnibus Bill 162, also known as the Get It Done Act. I'm not kidding, that's what it's actually called. There are many, many stupid things included in this bill, which I have no doubt was purposely overstuffed to hide the most egregious inclusion of all, expropriation. If passed, this bill will give the Ontario government a massive overreach by allowing them to expropriate land, including both farms and conservation areas on the Greenbelt, without a complete environmental assessment. This bill also included imposed boundary expansions, forcing 12 major municipalities to update their official plan, which at least 8 of the municipalities will have to abide by until 2051. This expansion, at least in my region, is going to result in significant wetlands being paved over. Now, before I get into how this bill is going to affect the Greenbelt, I need to delve a bit further into the expropriation of land section of Bill 162. As I said, one of the worst parts of this bill is that it proposes to allow the Ontario government to expropriate land without a full environmental assessment. But here's the catch. The Ontario government has already been doing this for years. In 2020, while the public was worried about that other thing, the Ontario government not only took it upon themselves to expropriate several properties before completing an environmental assessment, but also restricted the rights of landowners by eliminating hearings to determine if the expropriation process was necessary to begin with, according to an investigation by the Narwhal. So, a large aim of this bill is to legalize the illegal things that the government had already allegedly been doing. According to the Ontario government's own website, Bill 162, quote, introduces immunity provisions to help mitigate legal risk resulting from this legislation, unquote. Great. Oh, and the Narwhal also leaked internal documents about the bill, where the Ontario government acknowledged that Indigenous communities and environmental organizations, quote, may be concerned with the limited opportunities for engagement, unquote, and might bring legal challenges and might take issues with the plan. So they knew that this was going to piss people off. But don't worry, they also added that, quote, developers and construction companies may react positively.
Duh.
Now, in 2023, Doug Ford might have backed down from building houses on the Greenbelt, but when he said he wouldn't touch the Greenbelt, he left out a giant asterisk. It's not actually illegal to build on the Greenbelt, if you're building infrastructure. So shortly after his election in 2018, Doug Ford resurrected a project that had been shelved by the Liberal government, Highway 413, a 4 to 6 lane highway that will touch the Greenbelt. It will pave over nearly 400 acres of it, and Bill 162 will give the project the green light to do so without completing an environmental assessment. According to Environmental Defense, this project will cut through at least 220 wetlands, 85 waterways, 2,000 acres of farmland, and the habitats of at least 11 at-risk species and 29 species protected under the Federal Species at-Risk Act. Not to mention, the project is completely unnecessary. Highway 407, which is just a few kilometers south of the proposed project, is underutilized and could be opened up to truckers instead of spending a minimum of $6 billion in taxpayer money on constructing Highway 413. Oh, and while the Ontario government has marketed Highway 413 as a way to save commuters 30 minutes of drive time, a study commissioned by the previous Liberal government suggested that the real number is closer to 60 seconds. Maximum. Even worse, the Ministry of Transportation Ontario has already said that the project has potential to expand up to 10 lanes by 2041, destroying even more land. And major transit, historically, has opened the doors for urban sprawl, which, as I said earlier, is already being forced onto 12 major municipalities through this bill. Since infrastructure is a relatively vague term, and suburbs need infrastructure like power and other facilities, the Greenbelt will be open to more destruction in the future. So, who stands to gain from this? A 2021 investigation by the Toronto Star and Canada's National Observer found that 8 developers owned thousands of acres along the proposed Highway 413 route. 4 of these developers are connected to Doug Ford's government through party officials and former politicians turned registered lobbyists, and 3 other developers employ the chair of Caroline Mulrooney's 2018 PC leadership campaign as a government lobbyist. Oh, and Caroline Mulrooney just happened to be serving as the Minister of Transportation at the time. She's currently the President of the Treasury Board of Ontario. And if you're Canadian, yeah, she's that Mulrooney. Another developer, Michael DeGasperis, hosted both Doug Ford and Conservative MPP Stephen Lecce at a private luxury suite in Miami to watch a Florida Panthers NHL game in 2018, shortly after the Highway 413 project was announced. According to Doug and Stephen, no government business was discussed. It's important to note that most of the developers are donors to the PC party, contributing, quote, at least $813,000 to support the party since 2014. As of 2021, the over 3,000 acres owned collectively by the developers was conservatively estimated to be worth nearly $500 million, a value which could dramatically increase if a major highway would be built in the area. If this project goes through, the part of the Greenbelt that will be developed is located just south of the Oak Ridges Moraine, a protected and environmentally sensitive area. In October 2023, the Supreme Court of Canada overturned 2019's Impact Assessment Act, which had permitted federal regulators to assess potential environmental and social impacts of diverse resource and infrastructure projects. The Supreme Court found this act to be unconstitutional because it, quote, stepped into areas under provincial jurisdiction, unquote. In March 2024, just over 2 weeks from the day I'm posting this, the federal government decided to cancel the environmental assessment for Highway 413. So now it's up to us. Bill 162 hasn't passed yet. Highway 413 has not been built yet. So if you live in Ontario, you still have time to call your MPP and make your voice heard. Here's what's at stake. Please, if you have time, call your MPP, write them, email them. If you have the resources, please donate to Nature Conservancy of Canada or Ontario Nature, amazing organizations that try to conserve as much land as they're able to. Please check out and donate to Environmental Defense. They have great resources about everything I've talked about, and they've really spearheaded the movement to stop Bill 162 and prevent Highway 413 from being built. The future of Ontario, the future of Canada depends on this. I'll post links in the description, and I beg you to please check them out. Please help us save one of the most biologically diverse areas in the country. Thanks for watching.
Government per se, but the premier is coming from the health sector. Holy Christ. I just swallowed a bee.